Here's a plan to fix the New York Knicks in 2020. The New York Knicks have become one of the laughing stocks of the NBA landscape. Right now, being in New York, the mecca of basketball, only brings hope each and every offseason. As a big market team, no wonder why they're always in the rumor mill each year. We know about them mainly targeting Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving last season, along with other hopes of acquiring Jimmy Butler, Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson, or Kemba Walker. Nevertheless, they ended up with none of those pieces, and actually ended up getting a 25-year-old Julius Randle as their main off-season move. Of course, they did go into the NBA draft, and they did select RJ Barrett 3rd overall, who's shown glimpses of a future all-star but has also been somewhat sporadic, having one good game, then one bad game, and vice versa. Of course, for a rookie, it's what you'd expect if your name isn't Zion Williamson or Ja Morant. Needless to say, right now, the Knicks are pretty bad. They haven't made the playoffs since 2013, and they've had 7 years of mediocrity, with only one true real bright spot, and that was Kristaps Porzingis. But as we all know, that didn't last very long, and he was traded to the Dallas Mavericks. But now, it's a new year, a new offseason. The New York Knicks are able to head into another offseason with a top draft pick, a new president, and a lot of cap space. This video will break down what is next for the New York Knicks and what they could do via trade, draft, or free agency. The video will look like this: a quick breakdown of the Knicks season and their current list. Next, the NBA offseason, which includes the draft and their draft pick, future trades that could be made, and lastly, the free agency market. Now, before I get into the video, I just want to quickly start off by saying thank you guys for the support on the last video. Obviously, this is a new series on the channel, going through all the teams that are not playing in Orlando. You guys seem to really enjoy the last episode of the Golden State Warriors. This is the New York Knicks, but comment down below what team I should do next. Obviously, it's for any team not playing in Orlando. We just go through some rebuilds and some trade scenarios, free agency, basically what's next for these teams. So, this is the New York Knicks. I hope you enjoy. Please leave a like if you enjoy these videos. It does help share the video around and obviously get support. Let's aim for 1,000 likes for the next episode. If you're new, hit that subscribe button for NBA content every single week and hit that notification button so you never miss an upload. With that said, let's get on to the video. The New York Knicks right now have a young team, but a young team that is intertwined with some veteran players that aren't really producing. It's overall just a weird fit. When you look into the recent draft history of the New York Knicks, the last 3 top draft picks have been Frank Ntilikina, Kevin Knox, and RJ Barrett. And it can be argued that not only have these players been disappointing at times, they've also shown the inability to be able to shoot. In a league that is transitioned into a 3-point heavy league, this is obviously very worrying, as they rank last in 3-pointers made and 4th last in the league 3-point percentage. RJ Barrett is obviously somewhat of an exception, as he's only just completed or nearly completed his rookie season, but Ntilikina and Kevin Knox are on the verge of being moved after just a few seasons in the league and as top 10 draft picks, which isn't a great sign. Mitchell Robinson, on the other hand, is a young piece for this team that has shown a lot of potential for a 36 overall draft pick, but yet the Knicks don't start him right now, and whilst I understand that he's young and probably inconsistent, not the best player offensively, and has some lapses in terms of fouling on the defensive end, most of his growth will come just by playing on the court and learning as a 22-year-old. They only managed to get 21 wins this season, and they will get a top draft pick in this year's NBA draft. So what is next for the New York Knicks? Heading into the 2020 NBA draft, we don't currently know what pick they'll get, but we know that it will most likely be a top 3 to 5 pick. Would it be possible they don't select a draft pick and they actually look for a trade? Well, with the young list they currently have, it would be unlikely, but I think if the right offer presents itself, they would take a serious look, considering their draft history in recent years has looked somewhat sus, and getting an all-star level talent that is currently in the league can help propel the rebuild further. With a team like New York, that's all they really need, an all-star level talent, because it is New York, and they can attract high-level free agents, because of the simple reason that they are New York, the mecca of basketball. And whilst the free agency of 2020 isn't as great as the past years or even future years like the next year's 2021 free agency, if I were the new president, Leon Rose, this would be my plan. And whilst I'm at it, comment what plan you would have if you were the Knicks management right now. So firstly, I'd be looking at the draft, looking at the trade targets that were being offered at the time, trying to make a few calls and seeing what the availability of players like Bradley Beal, Chris Paul, Damian Lillard, and even Devin Booker were. All these players, while some being more attainable than others, I believe for the right price are available. Bradley Beal is always in trade rumours for a reason. The Wizards aren't playing well, and his partner in crime has been injured for the last few seasons, so Bradley Beal has been left alone to see how far he can carry the Wizards, and another year of not making the playoffs sees him in trade talks. Nevertheless, the Wizards are also going young with Rui Hachimura, and adding a top 5 pick could be somewhat valuable to pair Rui up with another top 5 draft pick this season. The next player is Chris Paul. And whilst he's been a huge surprise for the Oklahoma City Thunder this season, outside of a great story, you have to look at the facts. He is 35 years old, on a contract paying $38.5 million this season, $41.3 million next season, and $44.2 million during the 2021-2022 season, which makes a deal quite challenging for any other team except the New York Knicks. And the Thunder, I'm sure, would love to pair Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with young players that have potential. And this could include Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina, and the Knicks wouldn't have to give up their top draft pick this season. Whilst the Oklahoma City Thunder storyline has been an amazing one to watch, it's quite obvious that they won't make the finals and they won't win a championship with the list they have. So having Chris Paul for the next 3 years may do more damage than it would actually help the Oklahoma City Thunder outside of this season. The last two players are Devin Booker and Damian Lillard, which are two players that have been recently thrown in by the New York Knicks trade rumours, and people believe they have the ability to join the Knicks if the right offer is made available. But obviously these are two of the more unlikely suitors to be sent over in a trade, but if the Knicks are willing to throw a top 5 pick, a future first round pick, young assets like Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina, it may just be enough to sway one of the two teams, but it's still very unlikely. Damian Lillard, he's a great player, and the Knicks would have to give up a lot to get him on their team, and Portland probably doesn't want to get rid of him, and Dame probably doesn't want to go to New York either. But at the same time, stranger things have happened in the NBA. Damian Lillard in a New York Knicks jersey isn't the most unrealistic option if the right trade is made available. And at the end of the day, the Portland Trailblazers may not even be a playoff team this season, which may leave Damian Lillard asking questions and maybe demanding a trade, but we'll see what happens. I personally believe a trade for Chris Paul would be the most reasonable and the most realistic. The reason why the Knicks could trade for Chris Paul without losing their draft pick for this year is because Frank Ntilikina and Kevin Knox are still young, and obviously Chris Paul's contract diminishes his trade value by quite a bit. It is also very well known that the New York Knicks have already shown interest as recently as a few months ago about Chris Paul, and they believe that he would provide strong leadership for their young players and help jumpstart the winning culture that New York wants to establish under their new president Leon Rose, which makes a lot of sense. He's not the player that will bring New York a championship, but he's a player that the Knicks can use to rebuild the culture and attract some potential future free agents to join the team and become a powerhouse the way they once were. A trade could look somewhat like this: Chris Paul and a young Oklahoma City Thunder player that's on a very cheap contract, for Kevin Knox, Frank Ntilikina, and a bunch of veteran players to help make the salaries work. That includes Taj Gibson, Wayne Ellington, possibly Elfrid Payton, and other contracts that aren't really beneficial for the Knicks to keep around to actually make the salaries work because of Chris Paul's massive contract. Losing Knox and Frank Ntilikina may be seen as too early to be giving them up, but I just believe they haven't shown enough, and if you can go into a draft this season with a top 5 pick, you already have RJ Barrett, and you can have Chris Paul going into next season, that will do a lot more for the Knicks than keeping Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina. And at first it might look like an odd trade for the Oklahoma City Thunder, but they'd be getting a slew of young assets, including all the draft picks they've had in the Paul George trade. They'd have all those picks, possibly a New York Knicks first round pick for next season, Ntilikina, Kevin Knox. They'd be losing Chris Paul's massive contract, possibly Danilo Gallinari's contract this season as he's a free agent, and they'd have a lot of cap space, some young players they can use as trade assets or can keep on the roster, and they could go into a proper rebuild mode with so many options available for them. But back to the Knicks. Let's say they now have Chris Paul. They're going into the draft with Chris Paul on the roster. Anthony Edwards, if he's available at their pick, I believe they need to go and get Anthony Edwards. LaMelo Ball is a combo guard simply because he's 6'7" and can play the shooting guard position, and you can run a combination of Chris Paul and LaMelo Ball in the same lineup, as we've seen with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. LaMelo, even though he has great ball handling and passing skills, can play off ball. Obviously, if you're the Knicks, you'd want taller point guards if you're going to still draft a point guard like LaMelo Ball or Tyrese Halliburton, who's obviously a taller point guard at 6'5". And the reasoning behind this is it would look a little bit like the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's a tall point guard. He played shooting guard this season behind Chris Paul, but it worked well in Oklahoma, and I do believe it could work well in New York. You have Chris Paul at the point and a taller point guard playing shooting guard like Shai Gilgeous in New York, and I believe those point guards could be Tyrese Halliburton, who's 6'5", can play both shooting guard and point guard as a combo guard, and he is considered a secondary ball handler. But the main reason is because he's a great shooter, which the Knicks desperately need, shooting 42% from 3. And I think, of course, LaMelo Ball, who's 6'7", and obviously if the Knicks have the draft pick to get him, I believe they just should take the move and draft him. He obviously would be electric in the Garden. He'd be a player who'd be under CP3, who would push him to become the best possible player, and a great mentor, and someone with great guidance to help him lead the Knicks into the future. Depending on what pick the Knicks have, I think they should go after one of those two players in Anthony Edwards or LaMelo Ball, and if they can have a chance to draft Tyrese Halliburton as well, I believe that would be a great option as a great shooter for this team. But for this example, we'll say they'll draft LaMelo Ball, as I believe Anthony Edwards would have been taken by now, and LaMelo Ball seems like a New York fit. As far from what I've seen, he's the main target for the Knicks right now, and I believe he could work in a lineup that looks somewhat like this. Given Chris Paul's ability to play on or off ball, and LaMelo's height at 6'7", I could see Chris Paul at the point guard, LaMelo Ball at shooting guard, simply because he is 6'7", and people look at the NBL stats from LaMelo Ball, but didn't actually watch him play, which is fair enough. He played on the other side of the world, and he played in the NBL league, which is in Australia, which is exactly where I'm from. So I got to watch every single LaMelo Ball game live, and whilst he did have an awful shooting start to his NBL career, he was able to improve each and every game. LaMelo Ball is not an elite shooter, but he can become a good three-point shooter with time, and he's also 6'7", which makes him an effective perimeter defender in the NBL, and he can definitely play the shooting guard position on or off ball with Chris Paul. And then you have RJ Barrett at small forward, who just needs time to build his career. Julius Randle, who would actually benefit in the right situation. He just needs shooters around him. And if you can have CP3, a good shooter, RJ Barrett, who hopefully will improve on his outside game, building a team around Julius Randle and his bulldozer game can be really beneficial for the Knicks if he can just play the way he needs to play. But people forget, he's only in his 4th full year after being injured in his first ever season, and he was still a pick 7 overall. So he does still have a lot of potential to be a decent player in the league and an all-star level talent. And then obviously at center, Mitchell Robinson, who's a great defensive center but is just very young right now. But either way, given an extra year, maybe they draft LaMelo Ball, maybe they get Chris Paul, who knows. I wouldn't be surprised if Julius Randle becomes a trade target as well. Throwing him in with a future first round pick may open the door for another future trade in the future, but for now, seeing how the Knicks transform from a bottom team into one of the more exciting teams will be a very fun thing to watch. Something must happen for the Knicks to take a step forward and not backwards, so let's just see what they end up doing. With that said, let me know what you believe they'll do next season. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like to show your support, subscribe if you're new, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. I am out. Peace!